Some people experience a persistent suspicion that their achievements are nothing more than chance wins rather than the fruits of true merit. No matter how high they climb or how many awards they receive, an inner voice whispers that they do not really belong in their position. I spent years fighting that nagging uncertainty before I finally understood that my struggle was what some call a fraud complex. While research suggests that a little self-questioning can keep one modest, too much of it robs you of the self-confidence you deserve. Working in a field where men outnumbered women by far, I found that these doubts grew more insistent. Night after night, I lay awake, my mind churning with worries that only multiplied with each passing hour. My work environment, heavy with subtle bias and the casual disregard of my contributions, deepened the loneliness I felt. Eventually, the burden of doubt and anxiety overwhelmed me, and I suffered a very public breakdown at my job. After my superiors declared that I was no longer needed, I returned home in despair and ingested every pill from my medicine cabinet until I was overcome with nausea. Out of the blue, a thoughtful neighbor, an active member of a local congregation, noticed me sprawled by the front window and quickly contacted emergency services. Following a rigorous stomach cleansing and a period of medical treatment, I was discharged from the hospital. Soon after, my family arranged for me to enter psychiatric care, and I spent the next 18 months wrestling with inner demons through various medications. When the institution finally could not contain the turmoil any longer, I was set free into a world without a home, money, or even a steady job. The weight of being tagged a mental health patient felt worse than any prison sentence I could imagine. I overheard someone at a nearby cafe remark that, unlike ex-convicts, who at least serve their time and learn their lesson, the unstable always risk another outburst at any moment. In the end, I managed to get a position cleaning offices on the night shift, and slowly my fractured life began to show signs of normality. The nights were less grim once I could afford even the most basic mobile phone, which let me listen to music secretly as I cleaned. My work took me through old government facilities and abandoned public offices, buildings erected on top of even older structures. After finishing my main duties, I would use my remaining time to wander the lower levels of these obsolete complexes, although I usually did not have official access to these areas. My past experience in an office allowed me to procure keys from contractors, granting me nearly unrestricted passage. Within those dimly lit depths, I discovered spaces that were both odd and strangely captivating. Even while my medications dulled my natural reactions, I could still sense that the atmosphere was far from ordinary. One of my very first discoveries was a room lined entirely with reflective surfaces along one side. The wooden floor shone with a worn polish, and in one corner a dusty piano had gathered a small band of scurrying rodents. In another section, I came across a pile of small, blood-stained ballet shoes, remnants of what might once have been a secret rehearsal space for the offspring of high-ranking officials. I later uncovered additional rooms with equally odd names, such as the boiler chamber, a narrow, low-ceiling shaft, the ruined chapel, and a lengthy passage that seemed to stretch without purpose. None of these compared in strangeness to what I found next, a small tin container, old and unremarkable at first glance, that sat tucked away in the darkness. It was round, with a lid attached to a built-in candle holder holding a feeble yellow candle. I recalled a faded picture from a childhood story about underground miners and their mysterious practices, and my curiosity could not be restrained. Carefully, I opened the container. Inside lay several intertwined fibers, a scrap of paper with a sour smell, 2 matches treated with a sulfur compound, and a small D-shaped piece of metal meant to serve as a striker. Naturally, I attempted to use the striker to light the candle, but when the flame would not catch, I turned to my phone for help. However, the thick layers of concrete and metal around me blocked any signal penetration. It turned out that the peculiar paper was essential. It had been soaked in something flammable so that when sparks met it, a small blue flame was born. I managed to blow gently on the match until the paper caught, then carefully transferred the sputtering blue flame to the candle's wick. Holding the candle aloft, I nearly dropped it as its soft blue glow revealed a massive door set immediately beside me. That door, made of a dark wood I later recognized as a type reminiscent of ebony, was completely unexpected. I knew such wood was rare and prized, not something to be found in crumbling, disused facilities. With a delicate touch, I pushed the door, which slid open effortlessly, and whispered as it moved over the polished stone floor. Beyond it lay a long, unmarked hallway extending deep into darkness. Unable to resist, I stepped through the opening and began to follow the barely lit path. The passage stretched on for nearly a kilometer before it terminated at another door identical to the first. A gentle push and a surge of elation brought that door open, revealing a shadowy chamber that resembled a neglected boiler room. This very room was hidden beneath the dilapidated apartment block I called home, a building so remote from my workplace that my earlier commute had once taken 90 minutes. Now, the existence of these secret doors promised to reduce that time drastically. The newfound shortcut meant that I could be at work in a mere 10 minutes rather than wasting hours commuting. This extra time gave me the freedom to sleep in, browse the internet, enjoy a modest breakfast at an affordable cafe, or simply relax with a book, an indulgence I had not allowed myself since my collapse and subsequent treatment. My colleagues and boss quickly noticed the improvement in my mood, and my responsibilities at work grew just a little. Even then, another astonishing secret revealed itself. The tin container, whom I began to call the igniter, worked in more than one location. I discovered similar doors hidden under other public buildings and apartment blocks, all connecting back to my own small dwelling. No matter where my nightly cleaning duties took me, I always encountered a short, direct passage that allowed me to return home. I also noticed that these bare concrete halls, once completely motionless, had transformed slightly. A gentle, steady draft now passed through them, as if the space itself had come to life. For the first time in years, I felt as though my life was turning around, and I began to hope that better days were ahead. My promotion to shift manager brought additional income, which I used mainly to explore a long-dormant indulgence: food. Having lived on a limited diet for so many years, I had grown numb to the vast selection available at local markets. One evening, while walking home through the inky darkness of the secret passage I now called the Spark Passage, I emerged into the chill basement of a local food warehouse. Bathed in the steady flicker of my ever-burning candle, I gazed at enormous crates and pallets filled with supplies that had long been forgotten. It did not take long to decide what to do next. I loaded my bag with as many gourmet treats and luxuries as I could carry, and over the following days I returned repeatedly until my cupboards overflowed with quality ingredients and fine delicacies I had never known before. The minor inconvenience of a longer walk through those hidden passages was easily overlooked when food was free and plentiful. With renewed energy, I even began attending a nearby gym, shedding the extra weight that had clung to me for years. My old clarity of thought gradually returned alongside a rekindled ambition. I soon came to think of the igniter as a gift, a mysterious token given to me by some unfathomable power as compensation for all my suffering. Learning how to navigate those dark passageways came naturally, and I discovered that by focusing intently on where I wanted to go, the winding routes would guide me accordingly. With every step and every regained scrap of wit, I also felt a desire to reclaim even a semblance of the life I had known before. I was never going to achieve the success of a high earner again, but I could still create a life that felt rich and fulfilling. I used the secret passages to raid forgotten storage areas filled with stylish clothing, refined makeup, alluring jewelry, elegant shoes, and even lavish beauty products, reminiscent of a clever character outwitting greedy tycoons in a modern fable. Then one night, while traversing a passage in the opposite direction, I noticed a stray light heading toward me. I instantly panicked, certain it was a security guard finally tracking the intruder who had been plaguing these hidden routes. I hurried to a nearby door, slammed it shut, and snuffed out the candle's wick. In the echo of that action, I heard a distant curse just before the door seemed to vanish entirely. For almost a month, I stayed away from the secret routes, frightened by the encounter. Yet the allure of that covert lifestyle was too magnetic to resist. Soon enough, I found myself reopening the igniter and inspecting its contents once more. The familiar items, twisted fibers, a scrap of pungent paper, 2 sulfur-coated matches, and a tiny metal striker, stared back at me as they always had. With grim resolve, I lit the candle again, secured the igniter, and pushed open the door to re-enter the deep passage. At first, a distant light bobbing down the path filled me with unease. But then I noticed something unexpected. Its glow had the same gentle blue tone as my own candle's flame. Disbelief mixed with determination as I advanced steadily toward the source. As I drew closer, I soon encountered a man standing in the faint light, dressed neatly in garments that, despite his exhaustion, were surprisingly tidy. His eyes, clouded by fatigue, were empty and pleading at the same time. In a shaking voice, he cried out, "Please, I can't find the exit. This endless maze is swallowing me up. Help me, I beg you." Clutched in his trembling hand was a container almost identical to my igniter, though his candle was nearly spent while mine burned as brightly as ever. In a flash of desperation and anger, he lunged forward and wrenched the light from my fingers before sprinting away, leaving his own container behind on the stone floor. Despite the seriousness of what had happened, I couldn't help but let a dry laugh escape me. After all, in that straight passage, there was no real way for him to outrun his fate. Yet when I noticed that the dim light from his abandoned container began to fade into a sickly golden glow, a dread I had never experienced before settled over me. It was as if the walls themselves, heated and weakening, were about to crumble while strange moans of deep agony echoed in the space. I chased after him, and soon caught up to the stumbling man who was now weeping uncontrollably. I snatched back the precious light from his weak grasp and pushed him gently to the ground. "You can't escape it forever," he murmured between sobs. "Once you go too deep, there is no turning back. The light will vanish, and you'll be trapped in these endless passages." As he sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face, a pool of dull golden radiance spread across the hot stone. I asked him, voice trembling, "What is happening?" He replied in a whisper, "It is the inevitable end." In that moment, from a ring of molten golden light, hands of blazing metal emerged and dragged him down through the floor with a terrible hissing sound, as though superheated metal met soft skin. In an instant, his anguished cries faded into silence as he was pulled away into oblivion. That horrifying sight shook me to my core. I fought hard to distance myself from the igniter, hoping that by cutting my reliance on the secret passages, I could stem the tide of depression that had resurfaced. I resolved to use the igniter only when absolutely necessary, to limit my trips through those dark, hidden routes as much as possible. Yet the memory of that agonized face and his final words blazed behind my eyes, taunting me for my inability to break free. Frustration and self-anger began to overtake me as I realized how attached I had become to that small, glowing candle. My stubborn resolve wavered under the pull of temptation, even though I knew that each use might inch me closer to a fate much grimmer than any I had previously imagined. I began to suspect that the man I had chased had squandered what little light he possessed by wandering too far along lengthy, improbable paths, making a dire mistake that I was determined not to repeat. Soon I started noticing odd scratchings along the walls of these hidden routes, cryptic messages written in a language I did not understand. Technology seemed to falter in these depths. My phone would freeze and become useless, forcing me to copy the puzzling inscriptions by hand so that I might decipher their meaning later. To my dismay, I learned that the script was written in a tongue that resembled Hebrew. I even brought a small dictionary down with me on one journey to help interpret the ominous words. What I uncovered chilled me far beyond any fear of returning to institutional care. The scratched message warned that once you pass beyond the fourth inner circle, you are doomed, a fate worse than any addiction or vice imaginable. It proclaimed that while the igniter might grant every wish you could dream of, it would trap you within those endless dim pathways for eternity. The long, rambling inscription went on to speak of immortal souls and eternal punishment, asserting that eventually the hidden doors would cease to appear and the flame would die out, leaving you forever ensnared in a realm of torment. Once lost, the igniter would slowly make its way back to the surface, ever seeking another soul to corrupt. I sat there in shock, reading the final lines and feeling the heavy truth settle within me. After that day, I began to seek guidance from those who had walked similar dark roads. I met an old friend, Mr. Denton, who recounted his own long battle with this wretched curse. He told me about nights spent aimlessly wandering these secret passages, endlessly searching for an exit. His story was filled with sorrow and hard-earned lessons. He warned that the only escape lay in confronting the curse at its source by sending the igniter deep into the nether zone where it would be forever trapped. Mr. Denton's words resonated with me, and I started gathering every scrap of information I could find about these hidden regions. I learned from countless scattered accounts that there was a final passage, a route leading to an area so forbidding that those who entered might never return. The more I read and listened, the more I believed that a final journey, however harrowing, was my only chance to break free from the device's grip. I recalled a conversation with a wise mentor, Pastor Revin, who had once lit a spark in my darkest hours. He had spoken of a redemption that could be earned only by surrendering the source of temptation to a realm of relentless punishment. His words resonated with me then and have haunted me ever since. Acting on his advice would mean sacrificing not only a piece of my soul, but risking an eternal stain upon it. And yet, as hopeless as my current existence felt, I began to think that such a sacrifice might be my only route to true freedom. With a heavy heart, I started to prepare for what I now considered the final pilgrimage. I gathered the few valuables I still had and started to pack away the remnants of my former life. Each night, I retraced my steps along those shadowy passages with increasing resolve. Every stride was filled with both fear and determination as I inched closer to what I hoped would be the threshold of my redemption. The very path that had once provided me comfort now challenged me with every step. I spent long hours alone, rehearsing in my mind the final act I would perform. I pictured a vast, heavy door made of that dark, lustrous wood I had seen before, a door that would lead to a place where the normal laws of time and consequence no longer applied. I imagined that beyond this threshold lay an expanse of emptiness where I could cast the igniter once and for all, sealing its curse forever. The thought of stepping into that unknown territory both frightened and compelled me. It felt as if every decision I made would tip the balance between hope and despair. The final evening of preparation came slowly and with a deep sense of inevitability. I double-checked every item in my pack, ensuring that nothing was left behind. I noticed with satisfaction that despite the chaos, my determination remained intact. With a deep breath, I set off into the labyrinth of hidden passages one last time, aware that every turn carried the weight of destiny. The familiar low murmur of distant activity accompanied me, and the gentle draft through the narrow hallways felt like an unseen guide urging me onward. At a small, quiet chamber with rough, unadorned walls, I paused to collect my thoughts. The silence was overwhelming, so complete that the sound of my own breathing filled the space. In that moment, I reflected on everything I had endured: the long, grueling work shifts, the public humiliation, the crushing self-doubt, and the faint but persistent glimmers of hope I had managed to reclaim. Each of those memories became a part of the reason I was willing to risk everything by venturing into the final unknown. When I resumed my journey, the passage felt different, almost as if it recognized my determination and was subtly guiding me toward the end. I did not know what awaited me beyond the massive door that finally came into view, but I sensed without doubt that this was the crucial juncture where my fate would be decided. The door, crafted of dark, almost gleaming wood, stood like a silent sentinel at the threshold between what I had known and what was yet to come. I hesitated only for a moment before reaching out to touch the door. In that instant, I remembered every word of caution I had ever heard, from Mr. Denton, from Pastor Revan, and from the mysterious inscriptions scrawled on cold stone walls. With trembling hands and a resolute heart, I decided that I must cast the igniter deep into the nether zone, even if it meant condemning my very soul for eternity. My resolve was clear. This would be the final act needed to end the cycle of torment once and for all. For a few long moments I stood before the door, carefully studying the tiny flame of my candle one last time. Every beat of my heart seemed to echo the gravity of the choice I was about to make. With as much determination as I could muster, I extended my hand and stepped through, entering a realm of utter darkness where no sound or light punctuated the silence. I found myself in an alien void where time seemed to stop. The darkness was complete. There was no hint of color or movement at all. It felt as though I had left behind all the worries and struggles of my previous life. In that heavy silence, I sensed the accumulated weight of all my past failures, regrets, and the many choices that had led me to this fateful moment. And yet, amid it all, a quiet determination burned in my chest, a final spark of hope that I might yet be free. Slowly, out of the black nothingness, a faint light began to emerge. It grew steadily until I could make out a surreal landscape of shifting, undulating forms and softly glowing surfaces. This place defied description. It was a realm where the familiar rules of life seemed to have been suspended. I knew then that I had reached the final circle, a point of no return where the igniter's curse might finally be undone. Here, in that extraordinary environment where every second felt like an eternity, I released the igniter from my grasp. I let it fall into a yawning chasm that opened wide before me, watching as its once steady spark dwindled until it was swallowed by the all-consuming darkness. My act of surrender was both a closure and an opening, a severing of the chain that had bound my fate for so long. I sensed that by letting go, I risked damning my spirit forever, yet I also felt that true liberation lay in this final, painful act. For what seemed like an endless moment, I stood in the silence of that haunting void, each beat of my heart a reminder of my fragile mortality. Then, as if by a silent signal, the chasm sealed itself and the tiny light was gone. I now found myself alone, standing at the precipice of an uncertain future, the oppressive weight of my decisions settling in around me. I had taken the final step to break the curse, and it was time to return to the world above. My journey back felt strangely different. Each step along the familiar hidden passages now carried the taste of finality. The once seductive pull of the secret roots had faded, replaced by a sober clarity. I emerged into the cool underground air, stepping back into a reality that was both changed and the same as before. I carried with me the memory of that final act, a memory that would forever remind me of the thin line between hope and despair. In the days and weeks that followed, I began to piece together a new life. I found a modest apartment, took on honest work, and slowly rediscovered the simple pleasures that had once filled my heart. I learned that true healing is not found in shortcuts or hidden realms, but in the patient, deliberate act of rebuilding one's life. I came to understand that while the secret passages had once promised an escape from sorrow, they could never replace the value of earning back one's dignity through hard work and self-acceptance. Even though I no longer returned to those underworld roots, every now and then, on stormy nights when shadows seemed to stretch endlessly, I would catch a glimpse of a faint blue flicker at the edge of my vision. In those moments, my pulse would quicken for an instant, and memories of that dangerous allure would resurface. But I would then remind myself of the promise I made to never again let a small flame dictate my destiny. I had chosen to close that chapter, vowing to live my life under the honest light of day, rather than in the uncertain glow of a cursed spark. I have come to see my journey as a long and arduous battle between darkness and self-determination, a test of whether one can truly reclaim the light from the depths of despair. Every step I took on those secret passages served as a lesson in sacrifice and in the power of hope over the seductive lure of easy escape. I learned that while the promise of hidden riches may dazzle for a moment, the real treasure lies in the slow, hard-won work of rebuilding oneself. Now, as I sit in quiet contemplation with the memory of that journey firmly etched in my mind, I recall the words of Pastor Revan and Mr. Denton. I acknowledge that my past, with all its twists and shadows, has made me wiser and stronger. I no longer seek a miraculous shortcut to happiness. Instead, I trust in the gradual, honest process of healing and growth. I know that my future, though uncertain, is mine to shape through the choices I make every day. In closing, I now understand that true empowerment arises not from hidden passageways or the fleeting glow of a tiny flame, but from the courage to face each day head-on. My story is one of struggle, redemption, and the quiet battle between despair and hope. With every morning that I rise, I choose to honor the lessons of my past and step forward into a life built on genuine determination and hard-won clarity. I set down the striker, a relic of a perilous history, and look toward each new day as an opportunity to create a destiny defined by my own strength.